Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the National Land Realty podcast, episode number 137. My name is Mac Christian, and I'll be your host for this episode. Today, we have a special treat for you. We're talking with editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine, Christian Berg. We also have in the lineup Aaron Sutton, who is a land broker out of North Carolina and Virginia. I like to give him a hard time and also name states like Washington and North Dakota, but no, it's North Carolina and Virginia. Aaron Sutton is one of the most highly successful land real estate agents in the United States today, and he's also the head of our Hunt Lease division here at National Land Realty, which sort of gives you I would call it an eye-opener as to what we'll be talking about today. Foreshadowing. We'll call that foreshadowing. I was looking for the right words. Anyways, we're talking about hunt leasing today. We're talking about why you might want to consider a lease, the value of hunt leases, and how they're utilized. And Aaron and Christian are both here today to talk about their experiences with hunt leases over the years. This is a great amount of information. There's great stories told. Sit back and enjoy. All right. So here we are with another episode of the National Land Podcast. We are here with Aaron Sutton, and we are here with Christian Berg. Now, Aaron Sutton is an agent over on the East Coast. You're out of Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Georgia, I think. No, so you're in Virginia and North Carolina?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
And Christian, you're the editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine, which is a publication that we all want to work at. First of all, I want to ask you, so how did you get started with Bowhunter Magazine, and tell me kind of your journey there?
Wow, that's a long story, and in the interest of time, I'm going to give you like the 30-second version.
All right, we'll take the 30-second version.
So I actually ended up in the whole outdoor space sort of unintentionally or serendipitously, I guess you'd say. I went to journalism school. I got a bachelor's degree in journalism, and when I was coming out of high school and then pursuing my studies in college, I just wanted to be a newsman, and I really enjoyed, still do, the political realm and keeping on top of current events and politics, and just kind of being that nosy guy that wants to know what's going on in the neighborhood. So I got my journalism degree, and I spent 17 years as a news reporter. And I've been to a lot of fires and murders and city council meetings and political rallies in my day. I've interviewed a lot of police chiefs and fire chiefs and all that kind of stuff. But what happened was shortly after college, when I was still in my early 20s, I got into the outdoors big time because I was living in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Rhode Island in southern New England. Hunting's not that big of a deal in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, the area where I grew up in. Only surprised to kind of know now how many deer hunters there are up there. But if you're from there, you could live your whole life and not really ever talk to anybody about hunting. But anyway, I was living in Pennsylvania, went to school in PA, married a girl from Pennsylvania. So living down here, you're going to know a lot of guys who are into hunting. So I ended up getting into hunting right after college, got totally eaten up with it, and was just very fortunate because I was building up all these credentials in the media world and creating a lot of content that I started to do some freelancing for outdoor publications, and one thing led to another. And in 2008, I had an opportunity to leave the mainstream media and go to work for the company Outdoor Sportsman Group is what it is today. That wasn't the name at the time, but I started out as the editor of Peterson's Bowhunting, and I was the editor there for 15 years. And at the end of 2023, the company merged Peterson's Bowhunting and Bowhunter, which they had owned both titles for quite a number of years, into one combined publication, and I became the editor-in-chief at Bowhunter. So pretty cool. Bowhunter obviously is a very historic brand. It's been around over 50 years, and there's only been four editors in the history of the publication. So I'm really honored to be here, and my hat's off to the founder, M.R. James, and Dwight Shue, and Kurt Wells, my immediate predecessor, all legends in the world of bow hunting. And it's been a lot of fun.
I love it when somebody can get into a career track that matches their pursuits. Because I did kind of the same thing. I always wanted to be in the outdoor space, but didn't have a good pathway. And I ended up, I jumped to do it. I worked for a conservation group for a little bit that was because it was the only way I could find myself into anything in the outdoors. And the politics there was so heavy that I lasted not long at all. And I came out of there really, really jaded. I was really fired up. And I made a joke going out of there. And I'm like, man, all I want to do now is like work for a firearms company. Like now that I'm out of that, I want to go to the opposite spectrum. And that's exactly what happened is I ended up working in the firearms space. And that kind of got me into the outdoor space. But it was like a retaliatory job. It was like, fun, I'm taking this one. And when that got involved in the outdoor space. Aaron, tell me a little bit about, you've told the story before, but, people probably listen to this, maybe didn't hear your last one. How'd you get involved with National Land Realty and land real estate in general? And then also walk us through sort of the leasing aspect of what you're chairing now.
Right. So, it's kind of like the stories y'all were just telling, but, I got my real estate license back in 2006 and, I was selling houses down at the beach. And to be honest, I could not stand it. I'm not a house salesman at all. And so then the recession hit in 2008 and I didn't sell anything for like 2.5 years. And I had a full-time job, so it wasn't that stressful, but still it was like, man, this sucks. But so in 2011, I decided that I wanted better opportunities at hunting properties. And I was like, I got my real estate license. Why don't I reach out to some of these outdoor real estate companies and see if there's not a place for me? So I went to work for one. I learned what not to do with that company. And 2015, I left and started my own firm. Had one guy to work for me. It's called Carolina Land Pursuits. And about 1.5 years later, Jason Waters, our retired CEO, I guess you could say now, he came up and met with me in 2017, or first part of 2017, and showed me what all they had to offer. And I was like, man, that's amazing, because I would just pay for a website and all this stuff, and I'm looking at him going, man, you're $1 million ahead of me, 5, 6, 7 years in technology ahead of me. And he said, hey, the train's coming to North Carolina. You can either get on or watch it pass by. I was like, well, that's kind of arrogant. He said, it's the truth. And it was absolutely the truth. And it was one of the biggest blessings of my life was that day I met him. So, but then, I do hunt. I'm in a hunting lease in Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri. I've hunted all over the country. But those are my three that I bow hunt Kentucky and Missouri, and we muzzleload hunt Kansas because we're in Southwest Kansas. Not a tree in sight, so it makes muzzleloader hunting the go-to, and it's easier to draw a tag muzzleloader. So yeah, I got into the hunting lease world about 2 years ago now, I believe. And now the president of the hunting lease stuff.
Yeah. So, and then that's kind of the conversation here that we're going to have. I did want to bring up. So, Christian, I didn't talk about any of the stats of what Bowhunter Magazine deals with, and you guys distribute to what 1.1 million people per year. Is that your yearly audience?
Oh gosh, you're like going to quiz me on like the print audience metrics and
I'll use the metrics that I have, and then you can just go yes. So 1.1 million readers per year, 2.2 million annual page views at bowhunter.com, and you host the Bowhunter podcast, which is great. I always love when somebody else that hosts a podcast is on this podcast because I know I'm being judged.
Well, and I also don't want to leave out, I mentioned him earlier, Kurt Wells, who was the editor-in-chief, now the editor-at-large. We also have Bowhunter TV that airs on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel, and our company's getting into a lot of the other digital video platforms as well. So that's kind of the wave of the future. Of course, YouTube's been huge, but now there's these things called fast channels that we're really getting into, where you sign direct deals with companies like Samsung and other manufacturers like that, where you get these tiles that pop up right on people's smart TVs. So yeah, the media landscape is always changing. So, it's funny, print I started with the company in 2008, and print was going to be dead in 2008. TV was going to kill print, and then the internet was going to kill TV. And the magazine is still here, and the TV show is still here. But yes, it certainly is a lot different than it was 16 years ago when I started. But yeah, you've got to be doing a lot of digital stuff. The podcasting obviously has taken off. And so the thing that'll never change, Mac, right? And this is what we always say in media, content is king. Content is king. So you got to have content. So whether it's a really snazzy reel on TikTok, or it's a great article in a magazine, or it's an awesome podcast, people are passionate about hunting and they want to consume content that deals with that. And so we just have to figure out every which way we can to create it and give it to people.
Yeah, media keeps on not dying, and you just get more media to deal with is really what it comes down to.
It's actually really a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. It really is for the consumer, for the creator like me, and also for the marketers. I mean, you guys know, National Land Realty, right? Like there would have been a time where if you wanted to get your message out to everybody as to what you do, you would have bought some magazine ads, you would have run a couple of TV commercials, maybe you would have done a direct mail campaign, and that would have been that. Your job would have been done, and you would have had it dialed. Now you have to cut that same budget up into 101 pieces and try to figure out how many different platforms and media you have to reach out to aggregate eyeballs,
I'm glad I got this recorded, because I'm just going to send that out to my entire company, everything that you just said. It's a good point to make. And I don't know how you came by the podcast hosting, but mine was literally, I wanted a podcast in the company, and I went to every single person in my company to host it, and no one would do it. So I just hopped on the mic.
Well, ours actually, another interesting story. Way back in the day, it started out of Peterson's Bowhunting, and Peterson's Bowhunting, my predecessor over at Peterson's was a guy by the name of Jay Strangis. He was the editor at Peterson's Bowhunting before me. And they started doing a series of radio tips. Again, you want to talk about the changes in media. Remember in the days before the internet and the days before podcasts, there would be outdoor like radio shows on local radio stations all around the country. Like some local yokel would get on there and talk about the fishing and the Mississippi River, or the hunting in the forests of southern Indiana, or whatever. And Peterson's Bowhunting would record these syndicated hunting tips and distribute them to be played as part of the outdoor shows on the local radio stations. And then after I took over at the magazine, I kind of reinvented that as a podcast. And so it started over at Peterson's, and then we brought it over to Bowhunter after I took over here late 23.
That's that's the evolution of that landscape has been it's been rapid. All right, so I want to jump into the leasing topic here. So first off, all three of us are hunters. Aaron, you hunt a lot out west too, right? Like you bounce around to the Midwest, and you bounce out to the west from where you are. Tell me a little bit about that.
So here in North Carolina, our deer is subpar compared to the rest of the country. I shoot a 140 at the most, and if you do, you probably won't never go hunting again, because that's the cream of the crop for you. And bow hunting in North Carolina is probably the hardest thing that you can possibly do, because there's so many woods. We don't have little fingers and draws like they do in the Midwest. So it's really difficult, and then you're shooting below average deer. So it kind of takes away the little bit of, excitement to it, because there's just so many days that you just get skunked. So started getting into some leases, and got into one in Kentucky. It was about 1,300 acres, and about an hour and a half north of Nashville, and really took off bow hunting hard then. And I fell in love with it, and I was like, wow. First year I shot 166, something just happened, 166-inch deer, and that was in September on Labor Day weekend, full velvet, just beautiful deer. And I came home, my wife was like, so what are you going to do the rest of the year? And I was like, I don't know. She was like, you've already tagged out. You're not staying here all winter. And I was like, Well, okay then. So I took off and went to Missouri and went bow hunting out there, and been going out there for about 6 years now. Kentucky, I think I was on my 8th year, and then Kansas, I'm on my 3rd year. So Kansas was the group that I was with. Kentucky, a couple of them guys were in that Kansas lease and invited me over. So, and we're shooting smallest deer is 180 up to 215s. I mean, that's legit numbers. So we shoot some big deer out of there. But there ain't a tree in sight, like I said a while ago. There's nowhere to hang a stand. And to get 30 yards from a 190-inch deer is tough sitting in a hay bale blind. So we back it up about 150 yards and shoot them muzzle loaders.
There you go. And Christian is as editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine. I'm guessing it's a requirement. Is it a requirement? Do they send you places to hunt? Am I going to get that jealous?
Yeah, it's pretty rough, I got to tell you. But I mean, I'm kind of feel like I'm in a similar situation to Aaron because I live in Pennsylvania, and it's not that different than North Carolina when you talk about a lot of the things that are working against you as an average bow hunter. Yeah, Pennsylvania is number one in some things in hunting, but none of the things that you want to be number one in. We're number one in hunter density and bow hunter density per square mile in the country. So there's not anywhere in the United States where there's more competition for the resource than there is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's why it's very, very hard for a deer to be mature. We do occasionally produce some really fine whitetails here, but it's kind of like I call them Powerball bucks because it's almost like hitting the lottery if you can get one, because most of our bucks are going to get killed at 2.5 or 3.5 years old. So I can honestly tell you, I have been blessed to kill some pretty big whitetails in my day, and none of them come from where I live. I've killed a couple 180s in Kentucky and Kansas, and some other 150, 160, 170 class deer, but all from other states like Missouri and Kentucky and Kansas. And so, yeah, I get that. And so it's no secret no matter where you live, right? And this may tie you right into that topic you want to talk about in terms of leasing. You got to control hunting pressure, and you got to exercise trigger control. Those are the two things you need, right? Because you can't kill a big buck where there isn't a big buck. And that's what I run into here. I even though I'm the editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine, people think that gives you some kind of a special privilege. I can assure you that nobody here in Pennsylvania wants to give me a whole bunch of acreage to hunt exclusive just because of the job that I have. And I also guarantee you that none of the deer that live here give a crap what I do for a living. Nobody wants to cooperate. So, I got to go to other places and in search of better hunting.
I run into that all the time with Idaho. Just like I live out here and I get the privilege of all the public land that we have in the mountains that I can just get out and cruise to the top of. But then it's like, I'll talk to somebody from back. He's like, I really want to go out there and shoot an elk. I'm like, whoa. Let's go with see an elk. And then maybe because if seeing one is the point, you can hike 30 miles in a day and cover a few thousand vertical feet and not see an animal. So let's you can't make things appear where they're not. And it is a totally different style of hunting, out here, the whole spot and stalk and hunt ridge lines and stuff. And same thing, right? You can't make things appear where they don't exist, and you're not going to find one just because you're out and walking around. And where leasing is a way that you're not going to have guarantees, but you can have cultivated land, managed neighbors, and a known atmosphere, and be able to, and if you don't like it, you can rotate it. It's not necessarily like a sales situation. So let's kind of jump into that. With hunting leases, just tell me about, let's go from a 101 level, Aaron. Describe hunting leases, how people get into them, sort of what they are and how they function.
Well, in general, a hunting lease is somebody, whether it's a single individual or a group of guys and girls that, want to expand their horizon inside the outdoor world. And so they say, well, there's 1,000 acres over here. It's $5,000. Let's put in $1,000 a piece and, go lease this thing and just get into it. But it's basically a group of people that are like-minded that want somewhere to go hunting.
Yep.
So
And you two just spoke to it. I feel like both of you are use cases, right? Like this is using a lease thing. And I had you describe that from a 101 level, because us folks out west don't really do a lot of leases. A lot of people are not familiar with it. I remember the first time I ran to a tree stand, like I was like 5 miles deep in a valley, and I'm walking back there. It's like, what the hell is a ladder doing in a tree? And I had to go from there. I was pretty young when I ran into that, but that was like a mystery to us. But leasing and that style of hunting is not as common when you get like, your Montana, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming. It's not as, but where you have the population density and less public land, as soon as you get east of the Mississippi, the only way to have a place where you can guarantee a hunt and guarantee the land management system is to do a lease. So over the last, let's take since 2018, we've seen a run in real estate that has broken every record known to man. And with that, you have land values that have quadrupled in a lot of cases in price, which makes land harder to get into. Has that driven a larger audience to leasing? And I'll put that to both of you, because Christian, you're around nonstop hunters and talk to them. And Aaron from the land side, and I'll start with you, Aaron. Has leasing picked up in popularity? And I feel like it's an obvious answer, but I want to throw that at you.
Well, it is an obvious answer. Yes, land values have increased. Therefore, what used to be a $500,000 tract that, some people could afford, now it's $1 million tract that few people, the 1%, can afford. So you get into it, trying to think of a good analogy. I don't know.
The car lease. You can't afford the car, so you get the lease.
Yeah, so for the most part. So you get a group of guys together and just go, hey, let's save each other some money. Let's all partner together. But when you get into a lease, then it opens up many of doors. Are y'all like-minded? Are we shooting trophy bucks, or are we shooting, 130s, 140s, and just trying everybody to have a trophy at the end of the day, participation trophy. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into the leasing side of things. But as far as the value side, I mean, it's way easier to get into the leasing rather than purchasing.
Yeah. And now, Christian, are you seeing hunters kind of flood to leases?
Well, it's interesting. You talked about the increase in land values, and I think that pushes leasing from both sides of the equation. From not, obviously the hunter side, those people have a vested interest in wanting to find a place to hunt. But as you've seen, not only land prices, but property taxes, me being in the Northeast, that's is a little different than, say, Aaron or you out West. I mean, I personally could give you an hour-long rant about the property tax burden in the Northeast here. It's leasing is allowing farmers and property owners, older folks that own some acreage where, it might be hard for them to stay in that home or on that property, keep that in the family without the added income that the leasing provides. And so I would honestly say in 20 years, just here in Pennsylvania, I still kind of scratch my head because I'm a little spoiled compared to the average person. Everything is relative. And if you get to travel like I do, I find it hard to believe that the quality of the hunting here justifies the leasing in my mind. But if this was all and you're not going to travel and you want to have a place where you can guarantee yourself a little bit of room to spread out, you just want to keep a reasonable limit on the number of people that are going to access the property and know that you can go get in a tree stand and not be constantly disturbed by neighbors and things like that. I mean, you're seeing leasing growing in popularity quite a bit, even in these states that when you look at them nationally wouldn't necessarily have a reputation as like a big buck mecca.
Yeah. And it's growing in popularity out West. I was going to ask Aaron, what did you had some?
Yeah. So I agree with that 1,000%. And then to grow on the value side of things, land prices have gone up, which increases the lease values. More people are wanting to lease land, so supply and demand, it's going to go up. What it used to be a $5 an acre lease here in North Carolina is now a $15 to $18 an acre lease. We're out in the Midwest, it used to be $15, $20, and now it's 50, 60, $80 an acre. I mean, it can be pretty substantial, but it goes back to taxes. I mean, property taxes just went up here in my county, in North Carolina. And by my house doubled. And I was like, no, it didn't. And they didn't care. But so they kind of coincide, land values, but it also increases the supply or the demand for leases. Therefore, that value goes up.
And Aaron, you were kind of talking about the group situation where a lot of people are grouping up and going in on leases together. I mean, I would say that for the most part, that's what a lot of people do. With that, how do you maximize the potential for success in a lease as you're getting it set up? Like, and I don't know whether this goes down to the landowner that they are leasing and they're leasing the property to people, or goes down to the people that are leasing it that are able to cultivate and manipulate the landscape. And then even the interpersonal dynamics of the group doing the lease. Like, how do you kind of like pull this all together into a productive spot of land?
It's a tough one. I've lost some good friends being in a lease with them. You just get something about 170-inch deer just makes a man go crazy. In Kentucky, we had 9 people in our lease, and most of us thought the same thing. We were wanting to shoot trophies, and a couple of guys, and it's no wrong or right. I'm not knocking anybody, but they didn't care if they killed a 130, 140. But if you shoot a 140 today, he never has the opportunity to be a 170. But then my lease in Kansas, there's 5 of us, and we hunt about 17,000 acres, and we are very, very picky over what we shoot, and we're strictly trophy hunting. I'm this close from breaking the 200 book. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. You got to be like-minded, like I said a while ago. You got to everybody's got to work together. You can't have 2 guys going out and doing food plots in a lease, and everybody else expecting to be able to go hunt that as hard as they hunt that. There's got to be some give and take there. Understanding is the better word.
Yeah. And then how about the land side? Do you get to dictate sort of a land management plan with neighboring properties as a leasee, or is that something that you rely on the landowner to go set up for you?
Usually it doesn't work out either way. It's you go talk to a neighbor and they're like, hey, we're going to shoot what we want to shoot. You mind your business. I mean, truly, and I mean that with all due respect, but that's kind of the mindset that I've always seen is, don't worry about us. We've had a guy in Kentucky, an adjacent landowner, he fussed because the kid shot a 130-inch 8-pointer. And he was sitting in the box blind and saw the kid shoot the deer. I mean, we were legal, but he could look all the way down the power lines and saw the boy shoot the deer, and he was furious over it. But how are you going to tell your 11-year-old kid that's on top of the world, hey, you shouldn't have shot that deer? And he won't ever shoot another deer like that again. Or for a long time. So the decent landowners are tricky.
Yeah. How about, so Christian, in your experience with going, to different leases throughout the country, some of them, I don't know how many leases you participate on, because a lot of times I'm guessing that you're probably a guest as part of Bowhunter Magazine, but do you enter into those dynamics even if you're there on a short-term duration, as far as like trying to get up to speed with everybody, or, how do you sort of manage that?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest deer that I ever shot was in Kansas, and it was on a buddy's lease that he has out there. It was 180, was it 82 or 84 and change? But anyway, you kind of have to realize that things are going to change from lease to lease, from area of the country. Like here in Pennsylvania, it would be more typical to have a lease just to provide some relatively unmolested ground. But when I say relatively, that's going to be very different than what unmolested ground is going to be in Kansas or Kentucky. And you also have to understand that the landowner's wishes are going to come into play, because even though you lease ground now, it's going to run the gamut. Some landowners are going to give you about free reign to do whatever you want. They're going to say, you want to cut down some trees, you want to clear some land, you want to put some food plots in, have at it. Other landowners are going to be very restrictive, and they're going to have rules about where they want you to park, what gates they want you to use, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and here in Pennsylvania, a lot of these places, if you're hunting farm ground, they're going to want you to shoot does. And if you don't kill enough does, they're not going to want to have you back as a leasee. So it's really relationships are everything, right? That's on the landowner side, and then with your fellow hunters as well. Like you said, if you're not like-minded, it's not going to last, right? You got to kind of understand, what's a realistic goal and scenario for the area that you're in. But yeah, it can run the gamut. Like Aaron sounds like he's on some really good land in Kansas, where they're literally trying to grow 200-inch deer. And if you took the same number of acres in North Carolina where he lives and tried to do the same thing, that would be nothing but heartache, misery, and frustration for him and everybody else involved.
Yep. Yeah, I'm hearing these stories, and my friends and I out here, it is meat hunting. We go to fill our freezer, because if we wanted to wait for the biggest buck or the biggest bull that walks by, chances are you're never taking a shot. And so it's different. And so I want to talk about that a little bit, as far as how, Aaron, you're talking about this area you're trying to grow a 200. What do you go through to do that? What's sort of, and off top of my head, I'm thinking you buy enough land so they can't walk off of it. That's sort of, where you have to go, and then you have to cultivate with the food and everything else. But how are you going about this?
So in Kansas it's a little bit different where we're at, because the deer density is so low. I mean, in what they call a single mile square, basically, and they got 4 pivots set up inside the square. Our landowner he farms about 40,000 acres and owns 18,000. And he says, I don't want y'all to shoot every deer that you see, but in one block, you might have 4 deer, and 2 of them might be bucks. And next thing you know, but when he stands up, it's like, oh wow, he's a stud. I mean, 190, and you're literally going, just shaking, but there isn't a tree in sight. So you're seeing this 190 at 800 yards, and you're like, I can't make that shot. I mean, I don't feel comfortable enough making 800 yards. Some guys love it, but so our deer density is very, very low, which allows us to be able to be selective on what we shoot. We know that this buck's over here, and he's not going to leave that mile block for a while. We do have some deer move in and out, but for the most part, they seem to stay within a relatively 3 to 5 mile area. So we know which deer to pick, and then we look at the age of the deer. It's 4.5, 5-year-old deer that's got a lot of potential. Which I don't know if you remember, Dr. Deer came and talked at our national summit a couple years ago. One of the things that he brought to my attention that I didn't realize was, a lot of people shooting at 2.5, 3.5-year-old deer, they're like, oh man, this guy's got so much potential. Next year, he's going to be huge. Well, what his thoughts are is, at year 5 to 6, that buck has become mature enough that now he's got his does, he's got his little corridor, and he doesn't have to fight as hard as a 3-year-old and get ran down during the rut. And so he's not fighting as much. Therefore, that extra energy goes into his horns. And I don't know how true that is, but it makes sense. 2.5, 3.5-year-olds trying to find his place in the world, and he might be a 140 with the potential to be a 180. So yeah.
Yeah, so you utilize it's a combination of patience and cultivation that kind of goes into this, of knowing when not to shoot, knowing that I want the trophy out of this. I'll come back next year. And is there, obviously there's a risk that it goes onto the neighbor's property, right? There's always, that's a thing. Do you do anything to try to keep him in there? Are you putting up food plots to try to keep him in circulation in that one particular area, or how are you sort of managing that part of it?
I've heard of guys, putting up scent bombs of human scent, I'm throwing hair. And, I've heard of different things of people trying, especially on the Iowa border, trying to keep deer from going back over to Iowa from Missouri. There's really not much that you can do to deter it without putting up 8-foot fence, truly, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Now, Missouri is a lot different because those deer, you never know what's going to show up. The deer I killed this year, we had on camera one time, and it was the day before, and I was like, oh, wow, here's a good deer. So I went and sat on the stand. We had never seen him. So up there, I've learned that those deer travel, 20, 30, 40 miles. I don't know. But they have a very big range. So adjacent landowners, you got to be friends with them too.
Oh yeah. Well, and so, okay. So we're covering group dynamics, cultivation. Let's talk some tangible things on just lease ground. And I'll pitch this back to you, Christian. You've hunted a lot of leases, I'm guessing. And I wanted to approach this experientially of what sort of, and it's always more fun to go to the negative space because I think that those are more entertaining stories. Like, have you had any bad experiences on leases? Just interacting with the land or just situationally?
Well, I mean, a lot of my experience on leased ground as a hunter a lot of it's through outfitters, right? Because outfitters lease a lot of ground, and I've killed, some good deer on ground where I was hunting with outfitters at lease. But I think what it really comes down to, okay, is investment. Okay. And I'm not necessarily talking about money. Money's a part of it, but I'm talking about investment of your money, of your time, of your emotional capital, your mental capital. Think about investment in hunting ground on a spectrum, okay? And all the way over here on the left, we'll call that hunting on permission, okay? And that's where you just knock on a door or ask a buddy and he says you can hunt. And that's great, but just understand that as fast as that's given to you, that can be taken away. And then over here on the far right is you put your hard-earned cash down on the table and you literally buy the dirt and it's yours. And if you want to put that 8-foot fence up that Aaron talked about, you can circle the whole thing with an 8-foot fence. And if it's a big enough property and you got an extra millions and millions of dollars, knock yourself out. But that's the spectrum, right? So leasing is this middle ground, but even within that middle, when you talk about things like food plots and trail maintenance and shooting houses and feeders and all these things that you can do, think about your investment and the time it takes. If I was going to go in personally on a lease, or if I was an outfitter, I would want an insurance from the landowner that, yes, I'm going to pay you X number of dollars, but am I going to have the ability? Do I have a guarantee to have this lease for more than 1 year, for 5 years, for 10 years, for 20 years? Because how much are you going to invest in a place that might be gone in 2 years? You know what I mean? Versus a place that that you can have for a decade. And if that makes sense for you and your hunting companions and it makes sense for the landowner, then that's the real win-win to me. That's when you're improving habitat, you're helping to manage the resource, not only to meet your objectives as a hunter, but to partner with the landowner. That's that true partnership. That's what I think everyone would really want, right? And that's also a place in the spectrum where you come back to what Aaron said at the beginning. Those of us who may never have the wherewithal to actually just sit down and buy a big piece of ground just for ourselves, it gives us the ability to experience that and still have camaraderie with family and friends and enjoy that time in the outdoors.
Aaron, I want to jump on that. If you could expand and then kind of let us know some of the ins and outs of leasing, both from the landowner and the leasee's perspective, as far as like do's and don'ts. Like what should you definitely get on paper? What should you try to get on paper? And what should you never do?
So this goes back to a lot of what we were talking a while ago with values. And what you were saying with, are you doing habitat management? Are you doing controlled burns during the winter and stuff like that? the value side of it is you might go to the landowner and say, look, I'll take care of everything. I'll mow the paths. I'll do the food plots. You don't have to come out here. But they might want a little bit of a discount on it because they are putting that sweat equity into it. But then it also goes into the 5 and 10 year contract. He's absolutely right when he says, why would somebody want to invest in a property that could be sold next year or that they don't have rights to? So if you can get that long-term contract, you're miles ahead. It's almost like you owning the property without actually footing the bill, kind of. So now from the positives and negatives, it also goes into, some landowners, our lease in Kentucky, we cannot turkey hunt. And there is, good God almighty, how many turkeys? And they're like 26 pounders. And I'm like, that's the biggest turkey I've ever seen. He's like, you can't shoot that, boy. Come on, man, please, just one. And so we don't have turkey hunting rights to it. We would pay him more money for the turkey hunting rights. But his kids like hunting and turkey hunting, and so whatever. So that goes into the pricing side of things, or the value of the property is, can you go fishing? Is there a pond on the property? Is there a year-round use, not just during hunting season, but now I can bring my kids out here. We can camp out on a Saturday night that they've never had a chance to, and, throw a few lines out in the water.
What are some red flags? Like what kind of shows you the maybe you don't want this?
As far as the property goes?
I think from both perspectives. Like if I'm a landowner and I have a leasee coming on and they start acting a certain way, what do I want to steer clear of? I'm guessing it's behavioral issues.
It's mainly behavior, or, leaving litter, beer cans, stuff like that. You know that you probably got a bad tenant. And so within those contracts, a lot of times people will put verbiage in there that if the landowner feels deemed necessary to void this lease because you break this rule, they are able to get out of that lease. So it kind of gives you a little bit of commandments to abide by. I can't drink beer. I can't, shoot deer at night or anything illegal with the game wardens. So as long as you stay inside those guidelines, you're going to have a happy, cohesive relationship.
And from the leasee perspective, I'm guessing landowners can be funny. And so how do you measure that as a leasee?
Well, the funniest ones are farmers, is what I've learned, because a farmer hates a mud hole for some reason. Don't mess up my paths. And I'm like, dude, I'm not talking about putting a forward drive to get through. I'm talking about just a little tiny bit of rain. And they're like, nope, once it starts getting washed out, it's washed out and it's done forever. So you've kind of got to be real aware of the landowner, what kind of person that you're dealing with. Saying a while ago, some people don't care what you do, and some people are anal to the word. So you kind of got to gauge your landowner, and if it's not a good fit for you, say, sir, I appreciate it, but we're out, and you can lease it to somebody else, or vice versa. The landowner can say, this isn't working. I don't like y'all drinking and camping out, and move on.
If I'm picking up the vibe of both sides of the equation, is make sure you've covered your bases in the paperwork. Is because if it comes down to opinion, that's when you have that differentiation in expectation, right? Where it's like, you didn't tell me I couldn't have a beer at my tailgate. It's not in the paperwork. It's stuff like that, or
but it also
just making sure that everything's kind of dialed in there.
It also goes into common sense.
Yeah.
It's a little bit fine to, you're sitting around a campfire at hunting camp and you have a beer or two, where if you're sitting in a deer stand and you're drinking while you're hunting, that's a little bit more of a negative attribute. And that goes into the common sense. Because we got parameters here within our contract, but also kind of like, dude, use some smarts here and don't, throw a bunch of beer cans in the back of your Can-Am and let them blow out all over the farm.
I would like to say that's common sense. What's the whole thing? It's not so common.
True.
I want to go through, do you utilize a lot of, and Christian, I'll throw this at you. when you're going into a new lease and stuff, are you using, GPS mapping systems to get in there? Are you using that kind of thing, or is it pretty much like, is it kind of set? Like, where you're headed and where you're going to station, and you're going to, like, tree stand is set up, or how's that usually work out for you?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly all the tools that are available now, I would think it's a lot easier to scout out a potential leasing ground ahead of time by looking at, the maps and the topography and the terrain and the crops and all that stuff being available digitally now. That would be where I would start if I was looking to lease ground, especially somewhere that you're not as familiar with. Aaron lives in North Carolina, but he likes good deer hunting, so he's going to go to places like Kansas and Kentucky. He may not know a ton of people there, but if you just get on your Onyx or your Hunt Stand or whatever you like to use, you can narrow in to an area that you like, and you can do a lot of that scouting ahead of time, and you can even get landowner information and try to reach out.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, and as far as actually setting up the property, I mean, that's obviously just going to depend. I mean, in ag country, you can pretty well look at an aerial photo and get some pretty good idea of some spots that are probably going to be good stand sites. And if there's an established trail system on the property or road system, that's obviously going to be a lot different than if you're looking to lease, a big piece of mountain ground, which you certainly could. I mean, you could go into Eastern Kentucky or Western North Carolina, and probably for a pretty reasonable price, you might be able to get 2,000 or 3,000 acres of mountain ground leased up. But that's going to be a lot more boots on the ground scouting to figure out, where the subtle edges are, and where the saddles that the deer like to use, and the ridges where they like to bed, so it just depends.
Aaron, have you ever used e-scouting to find any of your leases, or how did you end up coming by those?
So all my leases were already established, and I got brought into the mix.
Okay.
So they gave me a lot of guidance,
You just know the right people is what you're saying.
I mean, it's part of that's the name of the game. But a lot of times in our Missouri lease, our landowner is really good about, if he sees a nice buck, he will immediately text the group of us. There's 4 of us in it, and he'll say, "Hey guys, I just saw a shooter buck, running from this draw to this draw or something," and just kind of highlights it for us. But then also it's just learn by doing.
So obviously your situations are good case studies because you went and found leases and have huge bucks, which make me jealous to a level I'd have a hard time communicating. But as far as you work with land real estate, can you tell us about some of the successes or some of the situations that, 1 or 2 that you've worked with where people have needed places to hunt and you've helped them find it?
From a real estate.
So I didn't cut Aaron off there. He just got mad and left. I said the wrong thing and he just ran away. So he's back.
It literally just cut out and said Caulfield.
He's coming back. He's coming back. He wasn't that mad.
He said Caulfield. I'm sorry, Mac. My mind got flustered. Question again. From a leasing, from a land.
Yeah, and you're kind of cutting out on it a little bit.
I got perfect signal.
You were sitting. Are you in the mountains somewhere?
No, I am sitting. I have been showing a $3 million property today. I had back showings, and one of the other agents is still here. They're out back talking right now. I said, "Look, I got to get on the call." But you never stop in this business ever. I wish we could, but
all right. Well, okay. I'm going to let you go get back to your client, but I want you to tell me about sort of just give me an example of helping somebody find a lease.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we got a couple right around the house that, buddies of mine. They call me and say, "Hey, Aaron, we're really wanting to hunt a tract of land, and I know who their kid is." And I'm like, I go the extra mile for them just because it hits home to me of, "Hey, man, little 10-year-old little boy over there that I was literally there when he was born. I'm able to help him get hold of some turkey ground." But there's numerous stories. I mean, even out in the Midwest, with both recreational leases, and then you got agricultural leases through farming. I've had success stories that I could go on about for days.
Christian, with your experience in leasing, I mean, it seems like it's one of the only ways to get the diversity that you want to get out of the hunts that you want to have. What's sort of been your participation in it? Like, are you in leases now, or are you just working? I know that you get to travel a lot to do that kind of thing, so I just don't know your individual experience.
Well, I'm not like in a lease right now that I'm paying a check, but this is the thing that I wanted to say earlier, and I hadn't had a chance, is keep in mind that leases take a lot of different forms too. Everybody thinks of a traditional lease where everybody's writing a check, but there are opportunities where it can basically be a combination of money and services, and it can be whatever you sort of come up with. Being at the magazine, we have situations where we sometimes have relationships with landowners or people, even like with what you guys do, where people who are in the land business that want promotion and things like that. So sometimes we work out agreements. North American Whitetail, which is one of our sister publications here, they have a lease in Kentucky, and they do actually pay for that, but that provides us with an opportunity to have a property where we can, have a controlled environment to create content, do habitat management, follow deer, over the course of seasons. And it is very valuable. I'm fortunate enough to have some relationships with people. I have a good friend who does a lot of writing for me at the magazine. His dad's a farmer in Ohio, and he's got some really good property out there. And I kind of call that my lease. I joke around. I have one of my boys likes to go out there with me, and we call that Timmy's lease out there. It's his dad's farm. And his family does hunt it, but it's, we're just fortunate to have that. But again, it's dangerous, because if I get fired tomorrow and my buddy decides that he was only like me as a friend because I was the editor of Bowhunter Magazine, then I'm not going to have a place to hunt anymore. So that's the risk of not having that signed piece of paper that you touched on before. I will say this, I do invest in some residential real estate, and I wouldn't want to have a tenant. And if I was a tenant, I wouldn't want to be in an apartment without that piece of paper, right? And so you definitely want to have everything in black and white, because like you said, Mac, if somebody gets mad at you, things can change in a hurry. And at least if you have an agreement, then that, you may not be renewing that lease, but at least that you're guaranteed to have up until, the time that your current term is up, and all the rights and privileges that you have enumerated in that lease are going to be guaranteed until that deadline.
Yeah, and Aaron, I got one last question. I'm going to kick you out of here to close out on a $3.5 million property here. So, last question. So, when somebody's working with you and they're approaching you about getting a lease or something like that, are you going through that paperwork with them and being like, "Nah, don't include this, don't include that"? Are you working with them on that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. We have a standard lease agreement that has, separate sections for other, addendums or amendments to the contract. But it's also very thorough in, do we have fishing rights? Do you have turkey rights? Is this a complete turnkey lease? Who manages what? Who keeps up with the roads? I mean, you can make it as simple as you want or as restrictive, but I call it protective more so than restrictive. Protecting both sides. Hey, there is no gray area of what can and can't be done.
Yeah, that's the thing with legal contracts, is if you have a disagreement, it wasn't good enough legal contract. Like, you got to have the stuff that takes care of all the potential disagreements that could be in there. So, hey, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. I know that you're running around doing the thing today, so I love that.
Man, it's been crazy.
So, Aaron Sutton here with National Land, and Christian Berg, editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine. Christian, Aaron, if you want to take off, I'm going to pose one last question here to Christian. Christian, I want you to tell anybody listening about how they can get involved with Bowhunter Magazine and sort of the opportunities that they have to engage with your publication.
Absolutely. Always appreciate an opportunity for shameless self-promotion.
I love shameless self promos, man. You gave me some of your time. I'm going to let you run the promo.
Well, I mean, if you're a bow hunter, if you like to chase animals with archery tackle, and you haven't subscribed to Bowhunter, or maybe you have in the past and you just don't currently, we would love to have you back. And the easiest way to do that is to hop onto our website at bowhunter.com, and we'll give you a lot of free content right there on our website. And we'll give you a great deal on a subscription, whether you want a print subscription or if you want a digital subscription to read it on your iPad. You can do that. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram. Check out our podcast, the Bowhunter Podcast, which you can find everywhere you listen to podcasts. And I guess that's and tune into Bowhunter TV on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel. And so there's lots of ways, Mac. But the best way is to invite me to hunt with you on your primo lease, and I will give you a free 1-year subscription.
I love that. I wish I had something to throw at people for that. I don't like that you said that.
I might even throw in a Bowhunter hat if it's a really good lease.
Yeah, a hat? There we go. I'll give you a hat if you let me shoot one of your bucks. I will double that. I will give people 2 hats.
I'm not going to get into a bidding war with you, Matt, because you have deeper pockets than I do.
I don't know about that. Awesome. Well, Christian, I like I said, man, I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on board and spending some time here talking about this stuff. It's super cool.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk some hunting and just have an excuse to blow off all your other responsibilities for an hour.
Yes, that. All right, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
This concludes episode number 137 for the National Land Realty podcast, talking about hunt leasing with editor-in-chief of Bowhunter Magazine, Christian Berg, and National Land Realty broker, Aaron Sutton. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.